The 30th of July in 2025 has been proclaimed World Day Against Trafficking of Human Persons. My guest is a remarkable woman, Monique Strydom, who survived being kidnapped by a terrorist group 25 years ago. And she was held hostage for 127 days in the jungle on the Philippine island of Jolo. Hello, Monique.
Hello, Micki. So nice to connect again.
Yes, I remember the day that I heard on the news of your release, and I was driving and I had to pull off the side of the road because I was crying so much.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yes. And then when I saw you shortly after, I was so taken that you sparkled as a survivor that evening and your eyes just lit up. So please tell us, on the Easter Sunday of the 23rd of April in 2000, you and your ex-husband, Cully, was on a scuba diving holiday in Malaysia. But that day turned out into a living nightmare. Tell us how this happened.
Yeah, it was actually a freak incident, if you can call it that. Wrong place, wrong time. We were in Malaysia on an island called Sipadan, which is one of the best dive sites in the world. It was our second day of our holiday, so we didn't even do a lot of diving. And it was the Sunday evening. We just had dinner. We were sitting. It's a very basic resort. We were sitting on the sun deck. We just had dinner when a group of armed men stormed into the resort and basically took us hostage, put us in two little wooden boats, and we sailed. I always say across the ocean because it felt like that, to another country, to another island, where they held us hostage.
And how many of you were there? How many did they take of different nationalities, I believe?
Yes, they took 21 people. So it was tourists. They took some of the staff. Actually, the guy who was held the longest, Abi, he was from the resort next door, and he just walked in to pick something, to get something from someone. So he was just there by accident, and he was also taken. So there were people from Finland, from France, from Germany, Malaysian, Malaysian staff. It was a big group, 21 people.
So you were actually sitting having dinner, planning your dive for the next day, and armed men walk in, and the next moment you're on the sea in the night. And this must have been terrible, the disorientation.
Yes, you know what I always say to people, it slows down, and people talk about time slowing down, and that's exactly what had happened, because you see all the weapons and you think you're going to die, so and you're a psychologist, the psychology behind it. And not for one moment, you're sitting at a holiday resort, not for one moment did you expect that something like that would happen. You would expect it in, like, South Africa, somebody would walk in with a gun, but not there. So we were felt very safe. We were enjoying our time. We were actually considering going for the night dive, but we had a cocktail, so we decided not to go. And had we gone, we would have been spared.
And how did you first come to know that you were kidnapped by a terrorist group, and why? When did you realize this, or how did they let you know?
You know what? They didn't let us know. We were held hostage in a hut. And on the floor of the hut, there was no furniture in. It's a bamboo hut. I saw a newspaper, because they covered the floor with newspapers, and it was a Manila Times. And there was a story about this group called the Abu Sayyaf, who kidnapped hostages, school kids, and a pastor and some teachers on another island on Basilan. And they beheaded some of these hostages. And I read it and I thought, oh, thank goodness we are not with them. And then 2 days later, we heard one of the other hostages that they had already for a while, a local, told us who these people were. And then we realized, wow, we're in big trouble. We are actually with a group of terrorists.
And then you were moved often, so the disorientation, but also fearing for your life. But then you also had to deal with hunger and with moving in the jungle, and just the landscape was very, very difficult to negotiate.
Yes, you know what we definitely saw is, when you think you're going to die, you don't worry about the other things. So you don't worry about the hunger. And we were so terrified. I mean, we were starving, but we were surviving because we didn't want to die. Um, and and then as things changed, then the military attacked us. Um, And people often ask me, how did you survive? What emotional state were you in? And I said to people, it was like a roller coaster. You are up and down all the time, because one moment you are terrified, the next moment you're so exhausted you cannot think. The next moment you want to cry, the next moment you see something happens and you're happy that you're getting food, or so it was up and down all the time. And it was basically survival. And when I look back, people always say to me, I would never survive that. I look back and I think, oh, I'll never survive that. But the will to survive is so incredibly strong when you're in that situation, and you do survive.
Yes, I always think, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, then and that's the first tier of needs is hunger and survival and etc. And you're literally operating from a mode of instinctive basic survival mode.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we didn't worry about food at one stage because we didn't want to die. So you really you go out of your prefrontal cortex and your cortex, and you really become like an animal. You run, you move like an animal. That fight flight
Yes.
paralysis responses, we saw a lot of that happening all the time.
And were you aware that negotiations were already underway for your release?
Not really. Something strange happened to us. They made some demands, and they left the Americans who they came for behind. And then the demands, I mean, people just said, we're not negotiating with them. We had no idea there was negotiations going on. And then the first media got to us, and then they said they might start with negotiations, but the investigation or the negotiations only sort of started getting a life much later in our captivity. So it was a question of, they took us, the military came in, with the media that came in. It was a huge embarrassment for the Philippine government. So they sent in the military to, the instruction was get them out or wipe them out. And only when they realized they couldn't get us out or wipe us out, then the negotiations really started.
And some of these members of the media, the TV members and missionaries and journalists, who came to you, then were then also held hostage. And how did that impact you? When you thought maybe they could go home with a message, but now they're also hostages.
Yeah, the thing is, we didn't know about half of them being kidnapped. We only met them sort of later in our captivity. So we had a lot of things, and you couldn't believe everything you were hearing. We did know that the first people got out, and our letters got out. The very first letter I wrote, and it was quite frightening when we realized that it's a lifeline. It was a lifeline, and suddenly your lifeline has been cut off. But luckily for us, there were a lot of people who made a lot of money, and some of the locals actually started bringing things in and out, paying. They were paid, I think, by the governments to do this, and then they gave money to the Abu Sayyaf as well. So that actually kept us going. It sent with those channels, food came in and letters came in, and yeah, that's what kept us going all the time.
Yes, I've also spoken to one of the hostage negotiators who was a colleague of mine, and he said how they read the letters before having been sent to you, and they had to censor some of them and decide which ones were going through. So on the other side, there was a whole system running already, that I think when you are in captivity, you don't realize, but there are people working behind the scenes already for you. How did you feel when you received the letters?
One of the first letters we got was actually from two journalists. The one was from, and I'm still friends with the one, is Inga Keen. She was at that stage with the Huisgenoot, or the U magazine. And yeah, it was just amazing to hear the voice of South Africa, and hear that people knew what was going on, and that people in South Africa knew, because it meant if they knew, our parents knew where we were. They had proof of life. And the other journalist actually sent a photo of my dad. So that was amazing, and it's amazing how little things, when you're in a time like that, how those things actually become important and give you hope.
Yes, I also say, my advice would be, to remember every day people are praying for you, and I remember us praying for you. And then every day people are negotiating for you. Never to forget that, because people might think they've forgotten, or people don't know where they are. We might not know the specific location, but they're definitely, you are in people's thoughts and prayers every day. But I don't think you realize that, when your life is in danger.
If you talk about prayer, and that was one of the most amazing things, we didn't know initially that so many people were thinking of us and praying for us. But on a Sunday, I always said you could feel this channel of strength. It was like just hit the jungle, and we didn't realize it was people praying for us. And only later did we hear that the whole South Africa knew what was going on, and people all over the world. And even now, when I sometimes I'll walk in a shopping center and somebody will stop me and say, "Are you Monique?" And you don't know how we prayed for you. And I always say, I do, because I'm a testimony, and it's a testimony to your prayer, because here I am and I'm alive. So each person who prayed has their own testimony.
Yes. I'd also like to ask you, sporadically, some of the others were released and then you're not released. What impact did that have upon those that were left behind?
Sure, it was quite rough, because the first releases, we knew that the Malaysians were going to be release, and we're not in the same camp. They split us into two groups. We were very happy for them because we love them dearly, that group. But then they came to get the German lady, and we had no clue, and they knew what was going on. We had no clue that this deal was being made, and it was really devastating. I mean, you're happy that one person can get out, and she was very sick, so she was definitely the weakest link. If we had to run, her condition actually endangered us. But on the other hand, you had to stay behind, so you see somebody leave and you realize, but I'm staying behind. So it was that thing of, you have mixed joy for her, but you're sad for yourself, and it's very conflicting, because it's to deal with that is difficult. And it's draining. It was emotionally absolutely draining.
Yes, a complete roller coaster of emotions. Every minute it changes. And then to be supportive of the people around you as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where the strength lied. And I always talk about it in my talks, is you need a good support system. And we had it within the group of hostages, because we knew what we were going through, all of us. If one was down, the other one would lift them up. And that happened every day. Or we would make jokes, somebody else would be sad, somebody would come and speak to you. So just that support system within the group was so valuable, and that we were there for each other. Obviously, there was conflict. There was conflict about food, but we sorted that out. And obviously, there were people who didn't like each other, but that got sorted out, because we knew we had to rely on each other to survive.
Monique, and it's now 25 years later. So please tell us about the wonderful work that you've been doing, because you've been dedicating your life to doing good work. Tell us about your charities and your workshops.
Yes, I actually got the calling the night before I was released, when we heard the military was going to attack us and we were going to die. That's what we thought. So I had 2 pieces of scrap paper left, and I wrote my testament on one, and I said, if I die, at least people will see that I thought about them in my last moments. And then the next day I woke up, and God spoke to me in a dream. And God said to me, you will go back, and you will go back and help other people. So I worked for charities many years before, and I said, I'll never do that job again, because it's the most challenging, ungrateful job, because people don't support charities. And then I had a media agency at that stage. So I started writing down on my last piece of paper a business plan for a charity. And after I wrote it, at about 11 o'clock that morning, I said, I can be released, because now I know why I had to be here. And I was released 2 o'clock that afternoon. And it took me really 2 years to get to know what my calling is. And my calling now is to help little girls who've been raped, because in our country, I think 80% to 90% of them are being raped by somebody they know, somebody known to them. And often it happens in their homes. So they're actually hostages in their own homes. So I founded a project called Matla Abana, which means power of the children. We nearly 23 years old. Incidentally, the charity was registered by the government on the 27th of August on my release date. And it was not something we could manipulate. So it just shows you the confirmation. We help about 30,000 children across South Africa who've been raped, little girls mostly. We are one of the few charities with a memorandum of understanding with the South African police. We supply comfort packs to rape victims. We do a school education program. We create child-friendly reporting facilities at these police specialist units, and then we train police officers. So, and we work nationally. All our money, I mean, we don't even have offices. We all work from our homes. All our money goes into the street to the communities where people need it the most. Yeah, we've won many awards because of the work we're doing. And, for us, it's just each life we touch and each child we give hope to. That's the thing that motivates and drives us. And then, I also do a training for the police. Then I do motivational speaking training, and all that. The money we raise with that actually also goes towards the charity to help us do our work.
I really want to thank you for this, this day, Global Day for Trafficking Against Human People. Thank you very much, Monique.
Thank you.
So thank you for listening to this podcast. And you can listen to the full interview with Monique Strydom and other interviews with remarkable professionals by subscribing to my Patreon and my Substack channels.